The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It fell against the cracked window of a one-room apartment in downtown Atlanta, dripping through the corners like the city itself was weeping for her. Amara Johnson sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, electric, hospital, rent. Her hands trembled as she pressed them together, whispering a silent prayer she'd repeated every night for months. Lord, I don't need a miracle for me. Just give me a chance to survive. Amara was 26, a nursing assistant working double shifts at a local hospital. She had lost both her parents in a car crash 3 years ago, and ever since, life had been one long battle between faith and exhaustion. Yet despite the pain, there was a kindness in her, the kind that refused to die even when everything else had. The proposal that wasn't hers. One Friday afternoon, while tending to a patient in the ICU, Amara was called into the hospital director's office. A woman sat waiting, elegant, cold, and commanding. Her name was Margaret Whitmore, the CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, one of Atlanta's wealthiest families. Miss Johnson, Margaret began, her voice smooth as glass. You cared for my son, Daniel, for the last 2 months. You've been compassionate. Amara nodded slowly. Daniel Whitmore, tall, handsome, 30, had been in a coma since a terrible car accident. She'd read his file 100 times, whispered prayers by his bedside, and played soft gospel songs while cleaning his wounds. He never moved. Never opened his eyes. But somehow, she felt he heard her. Margaret folded her hands. I need a favor, and I'll pay you $500,000 for it. Amara froze. A favor? The older woman leaned forward. Marry my son. The word struck like thunder. Amara blinked, certain she'd misheard. Ma'am, I don't understand. Margaret sighed. Daniel's grandfather's will states that if Daniel is not married by his 31st birthday, in 2 weeks, the entire inheritance goes to charity. I can't let that happen. You are kind, discreet, and already know his condition. It will be a contract. 1 year. You'll live at the mansion, pretend to be his wife, and in return, you'll receive the money. Amara's throat tightened. It was insane. Cruel, even. But she looked at the unpaid bills, her eviction notice, her little brother's unpaid college tuition, and for the first time in her life, she considered something she never thought she would. I'll do it, she whispered. The silent groom. The Whitmore mansion looked like something out of another world, chandeliers, marble floors, and portraits that watched you from the walls. On a rainy Monday, Amara became Mrs. Amara Whitmore. The ceremony was held in a private hospital chapel. Daniel lay motionless on a hospital bed, dressed in a black suit. Amara stood beside him, her hands shaking as the minister said, "Do you take this man?" She swallowed hard. "I do." Margaret didn't smile. She signed papers, handed Amara a keycard to the mansion, and left without another word. That night, Amara sat by Daniel's bedside in silence. His face was peaceful, almost angelic. She brushed his hair from his forehead and whispered. You don't know me, Daniel. And I don't know what you'd think of this. But I promise. I'll take care of you. Not because of money. But because you deserve to be loved, even like this. For the first time since his accident, the monitor beeped slightly faster. Just for a moment. Amara gasped, but then it returned to normal. She smiled through her tears. Maybe, you can hear me. Love in the silence. Days turned into weeks. Amara moved into the mansion, a ghost in a palace of marble. She spent her mornings by Daniel's side, reading him poetry, singing softly, telling stories of her childhood, the simple kind about bare feet, laughter, and rain. Every night, she prayed for him. Not for money anymore. Not even for herself. But for a stranger who couldn't even say her name. One night, while adjusting his blanket, she noticed something, his hand moved. Just slightly, but enough to make her heart skip. "Daniel," she whispered. No response. She ran to the nurse's station, trembling with hope. But when they checked, everything looked the same, no brain activity change. "Maybe it was just a reflex," the nurse said gently. But Amara knew what she saw. Whispers of the heart. Weeks passed, and rumors spread in the mansion, the poor nurse pretending to be a wife, the charity case who dared to dream. Margaret avoided her entirely, cold and calculating. One afternoon, Margaret confronted her. "You've served your purpose. When the year ends, you'll get your payment and go. Don't start believing fairy tales, Miss Johnson." Amara didn't reply. She looked toward Daniel's room and whispered. "I already have one, ma'am. He's right there." That night, lightning cracked across the sky. The power flickered. Amara lit candles and sat beside Daniel, her voice trembling as she read a letter aloud, one she wrote for him. "Dear Daniel. I know you can't answer. But if you could hear me, I'd tell you that you're not alone. I don't care about your name or money. I just want you to wake up. To live. Even if you never know who I am." She leaned down and kissed his forehead, a gentle, trembling kiss that carried every tear she'd ever shed. For a heartbeat, the room felt different. The machines hummed. And Daniel's fingers twitched. Amara froze, her heart stopped. "Daniel," she whispered. Nothing. Silence again. Tears streamed down her face. "Maybe that's your way of saying thank you." The miracle. 3 days later, Amara was doing laundry when she heard a nurse screaming down the hall. "Code Blue. Room 217. Her heart pounded, Daniel's room. She ran faster than she ever had in her life. Doctors surrounded him, alarms blaring. Patient's vitals are spiking, brain activity returning. Margaret rushed in moments later, shouting questions, demanding explanations. Amara stood frozen in the doorway, her hands shaking, as Daniel's fingers twitched again, and then, slowly, his eyes opened. Blue. Clear. Alive. The room went silent. He blinked, disoriented, his gaze landing on Amara, the first face he saw in months. "Who?" his voice cracked. "Are you?" Amara's heart broke. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to fall to her knees. "I'm your wife," she whispered. Margaret gasped, both in shock and disbelief. The doctors called it a medical miracle. Amara called it love. Learning to live again. Daniel's recovery was slow. He couldn't walk at first, couldn't remember much of the accident, but somehow, he remembered her voice. "You were there," he said one morning, his voice weak. "I remember, someone reading to me." She smiled. "That was me." Every day, she helped him walk again, learn again, laugh again. They planted roses in the garden together, and for the first time, the mansion didn't feel like a prison, it felt like home. Margaret watched from a distance, her icy heart thawing bit by bit. One evening, she called Amara aside. "I misjudged you. You didn't do this for money. You loved him before he even knew who you were." Amara smiled softly. Love doesn't need to be seen to be real. 1 year later. On the anniversary of their strange, impossible marriage, Daniel took Amara to the same hospital chapel where it all began. But this time, he was standing tall, holding her hands with tears in his eyes. "No contracts. No conditions," he said. "Just love. Real love." Amara's voice trembled. "Are you sure you want this?" Daniel smiled. "I think you kissed me back to life. The least I can do is spend mine loving you." The small crowd clapped softly, even Margaret wiped a tear from her eye. As they kissed, truly this time, it wasn't just a miracle of medicine. It was the miracle of love itself, the kind that doesn't wait for perfection, that heals what the world says is broken. Epilogue. A year later, Amara opened a small charity called the Second Chance Foundation, helping coma patients and their families across Atlanta. People often asked her, "Do you really believe love can bring someone back?" She always smiled and said, "I don't just believe it. I lived it." And every evening, as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, Daniel would wrap his arms around her and whisper, "You saved me, Amara. Not just from the coma, but from the emptiness I didn't even know I had." And she'd smile through quiet tears. Because sometimes, love doesn't start with two hearts beating. Sometimes, it begins when one heart refuses to stop believing. Moral. Revolving Heart's true love isn't about perfection, wealth, or timing, it's about faith, compassion, and the courage to love even when there's no reason to.